Hey, what's going on, you guys? Uncle Jesse here. This is the Peopoly Phenom, and in today's video, I'll be giving you my full review of this massive resin 3D printer. Let's check it out. All right, this is the Peopoly Phenom. It is an absolutely huge beast of a resin 3D printer. It is a massive machine that sports a really large print volume compared to your traditional smaller resin 3D printers that you typically see on the marketplace today. I've been lucky enough to get my hands on this for the past probably 2 months or so, and I printed a variety of different things. I'm really excited to dig in and give you guys my full review of the machine. So just some facts about the printer before we jump into the review. This is an MSLA resin 3D printer. Basically, that's LED plus LCD technology to actually provide the lighting that actually cures the print there as it's actually processing through and moving upside down in the vat of resin. So unlike your traditional FDM printers that use the filaments and plastic PLA, this uses liquid material that actually hardens because of the light source that's on the bottom tray, and the actual build plate raises up as it continues to print. It's a very cool technology, and you can get some really impressive results on these machines. The Phenom retails for $1,799 and is currently available over on Peopoly's website as well as matterhackers.com. If you're interested in this printer, I'll have links down below. Those might also happen to be affiliate links. It also sports a really large print volume of 276 by 155 by 400 millimeters high. That is a really big print area for a resin 3D printer, and in fact there is only one other commercially available resin 3D printer that isn't a bajillion dollars that has a larger build volume than this, and that is the Frozen Transform. I'm lucky enough to be able to work with both of these, and I know a lot of you have been asking for a head-to-head comparison video, and I promise I will be working on that here over the upcoming weeks. But first, let's get through this review of the Phenom. So let's get this right out the bat. This thing prints amazing, and I wasn't expecting anything less from the folks over at Peopoly when they decided to make a larger resin 3D printer. Overall, I have been extremely happy with all of the prints that I have been running through on this machine, and I've been pretty much exclusively working with the Siraya Fast series of resin for all of my prints that have gone into this machine, and I have really run into almost no issues other than user errors on my end when it comes to actually slicing and putting in the supports, or actually making sure that the build plate is properly secured before starting a print. So in my previous video on this machine where I gave you an initial look at it, I showed a bunch of different resin prints that I had run off and printed, and they still, to this day, look really cool, and I love having them on display. They've been sitting in my office over on my desk for the better part of this time here, and I still haven't really run off and painted any of these, but the results have just been absolutely outstanding. The example here that I'm holding up is a full-size mask, a face mask here that I was able to print all in one piece that was created by Trajan and is available for you to download. By the way, all of the files, I'll have links down below in the description where you can download and print those files for yourself or pick them up and buy them. Again, the details on this, it's super highly detailed, and again, the results were really nice. I'm not gonna go through all of these since I did cover that in the previous video, so if you're interested in seeing all the details on these initial prints or the unboxing, I'll have a link in one of these corners here to where you can find that video. And this is probably the coolest out of all of the prints that I've done with this in this bright green, neon green Siraya Fast is the, I believe this is a Sub-Zero Oni mask, if I remember correctly, or it's just the Sub-Zero mask, one of the variant masks from the Mortal Kombat 11 game. I also tried printing some of these really smaller things here as well. So Arminus 3D has these really cool evil pumpkins, printed those. One of my go-to miniatures is from Cast and Play, and this is the Minic file. Again, the details on these are very nice. And of course, I had to go off and print a Pickle Rick. So I'll have to get some close-ups here, but these are a whole bunch, like a lot of miniature skull heads. I wanted to test out something across the entire build plate of the printer and give this a print. And for the most part, it worked really well. Some of the actual skulls didn't adhere, and I don't know if that was due to a bed leveling issue because I've since re-leveled the bed since then, or maybe it was just too cold here in my studio space where I had the printer up and running. Since then, again, I have some space heaters that are up and running anytime that I'm printing because Resin 3D printers just don't like working when it's really cold in the air, and the prints for whatever reason just don't work that well. So it's something to keep in mind if you live in a very cold space like here in the winter in upstate New York. But these skulls again came out really nice. I think there was about 40 of them that I was able to get out of the print, and again, some of them did fail, but I wasn't too overly concerned with that, and I continued to move on with other prints. So immediately after the Cybertruck announcement and event, Andrew Askedall created these Cybertruck printable files that are available over on Thingiverse. I went off and printed them here on the Phenom as well, and again, was very impressed with the results that I was getting out of this. It is interesting to see, just because these are flat files, you are able to see the layer lines a good bit more than some of the other prints. This also has to do with how things are necessarily angled and how I had them supported as well. Some of that will help lend itself to actually cutting down and reducing on some of the layer lines. I did want to call out that I did have a few print issues here on one of the trucks, and I thought I was running into a screen burnout issue, which can occur on these Resin 3D printers, where eventually the screen is going to go, or in certain areas you're going to have these little dead cell areas or dead pixel areas where it's not going to print correctly anymore, and you're going to have to replace that actual screen. Thankfully, Peopoly has those available that you can buy online if that ever occurs. However, I haven't seen this since actually printing it, and I wasn't able to see anything on the actual screen, so I ended up just re-cleaning out the vat and cleaning the screen with some IPA, and it's been working properly ever since. And I have put in probably 200 to 300 hours of printing on this machine so far. Maybe it's even more than that. By the way, there's a few projects that I'm not going to show you that I've printed on this, just because I have some other videos that are upcoming that I don't want to spoil the fun for those. There's also this little show called The Mandalorian, and I went off and printed a few files from that. This is not Resin 3D printed. This was printed over on the Raise 3D N2 Plus. I printed the accessory files for this helmet here on the Phenom, and they came out really, really nicely. I'm very excited to work on this helmet. I'll probably be doing that here after Christmas time. But yeah, all of the earpieces also printed and came out very nicely and fit really well inside of their designated components here on the side of the helmet. Just made sure that I scaled these properly, because I did rescale the helmet, and made sure to hollow everything out. That's a key aspect of Resin 3D printing, that if you're not familiar with that, you need to make sure that you're hollowing out a lot of your files so that you're just not wasting and creating these huge, heavy resin prints, because resin's expensive and you need to save as much of that as you possibly can. And one of the other great files that I printed was this baby Yoda from FotisMint, just sipping on his tea or soup or whatever that was from the show. And yeah, this is just a stunning, stunning print off this machine. Everything that I've printed here is at 0.05 millimeter layer height. This should be able to go down even smaller than that. However, that's really what I'm comfortable at printing at for the most part on any of my Resin 3D printers. Typically, if I'm going to end up finishing something like this Yoda here, I'll still end up sanding it down just slightly. But what's really nice about printing in resin is that it's much, much, much easier to sand than any of your FDM 3D printed parts. This was also completely hollowed out as well. It's still a little tacky. I probably could have done a slightly better job with cleaning this. Typically, people will use IPA or isopropanol alcohol to clean their prints. I'm a big fan of using the Mean Green cleaning products. Again, if you wanted to see other Resin 3D printing cleaning alternatives, there's a link here that you can check out as well that I've gone off and done. This is a little too big. Most of these prints are a little too large for my ultrasonic cleaner. They do make larger ultrasonic cleaners, and I'm going to be looking into buying one of those as well, just because it'll make the actual cleaning process so much easier. For now, I'm using a big bucket and swashing these around and trying to agitate it as best I can, or using a chip brush to actually try and brush away any of the loose resin that's here before I run off and actually cure it. There are also some marks here that's typical of where you're going to see some of the supports that were help structuring and supporting the cup that Yoda is holding, or Baby Yoda, or whatever his name is, the kid is holding here. And the print that I have on the build plate right now is Aragorn's sword from Lord of the Rings. It's actually the broken sword version in multiple pieces here. And I downloaded this off Thingiverse by NamedJohnny, who remixed this from someone else over on my Mini Factory. I'll have all that info down below as well, but I'm really excited to get this off and assembled. All right, if you watch my channel, you know that I love 3D printing helmets. And can this print a full-size helmet? No. Not in one piece. It can certainly print it in multiple pieces. It can easily print face masks. And one of those famous and easily recognizable face masks is Iron Man's from the Iron Man movies. So this was the I believe it's Mark III mask printed here on the Phenom. And I actually ended up running into a slight line separation issue here on the face mask, and I think it was an issue with the file that I ended up having to have repaired. I have not since reprinted this yet, but I do intend on doing that. And as I mentioned, you can actually print these helmets in multiple pieces, and that's exactly what I've started to do here. So here is Iron Man's jaw that is fully printed here in one piece. That came out very, very nicely. Here is an example of one piece of a side of the helmet that I did not have the build plate properly secured in place, and it ended up just getting all sorts of warped and distorted. And then here is one of the other halves of the actual helmet that I've run off and printed. I ended up having an issue where I did not scale this correctly to match the other parts as well. So I'm gonna end up reprinting some of these. Again, most of the issues that I've run into when using the printer come down to user error, where I've either not properly put supports in all the correct locations to actually properly support it, or when hollowing the actual prints, I've hollowed it too much. For some of these larger prints, the walls need to be a little bit thicker than the smaller miniatures that I'm used to 3D printing with. So you can look forward to me doing a video here on a fully 3D printed Iron Man helmet in the near future. Now that we've talked about the prints, let me tell you about some of the things that I didn't necessarily care for this particular printer. The first one is that it is a huge machine, and that's not necessarily a negative. You need that because of the huge build volume, but it is a hugely heavy unit. It feels like there's cinder blocks sitting on the inside of this. It's got to weigh at least 70 to 80 pounds, and I would really recommend at least 2 people to lift and carry this into wherever you're going to be positioning it. This has not moved from this table since the initial unboxing, just because I have not wanted to physically move it to the other print room where this will be going after this video here. The other thing that I mentioned in the initial video that is still an issue to this day is that there are a handful of fans on this unit, and when it's up and running and printing, it is crazy loud. It's got to be easily one of the loudest printers that I've worked with or have on hand. It's definitely louder than the Frozen Transform. And I know Peopoly is actively looking into a solution to address that with a future update to this machine. And I know Chris over at Practical Printing has been working on a solution for this where any existing owners would be able to open this up without any soldering, I believe, would be able to make some fan updates that would help reduce the noise that's coming from the fans as well, which is great. And I know I'll be doing that as well here in the near future because this thing is just really, really loud. The other issue that I have is that the build plate is nice, and I've had no issues with the prints adhering to the build plate. However, it's just very awkward to hold and use. Removing prints from this, it's not easy to grip it or anything like that. It's got some sharp edges to it, so it's just kind of digging into your skin as you're pulling it out of there. And it's, again, just kind of awkward to hold and position when you're trying to get the prints off or just trying to get the print bed back on the machine. The Frozen Transform at least has some little handles that they've built onto it. It's not the greatest, but it is a bit of a solution. It's still, theirs is also a little awkward to hold, but it's at least slightly better than this particular setup here. The other issue that I have is that it's not tapered at all. So the build plate collects resin right on the top. So as you're initially printing and it's lifting out of the vat, the resin is just going to pool up and collect on top of that flat build plate. So I always make sure to scrape off any excess resin before it gets too high up, and it just pours back into the actual vat, which isn't that big of an issue. However, it's just something that I have to do with every print. And if I don't do that, then I'm gonna have a ton of resin sitting on the build plate. When I take this off, it's gonna make a massive, massive mess. So I'm hoping here in the future, some folks will actually make some mods here that you can 3D print, sort of like what the Elgu Mars and the Anycubic Photon have, where there might be some sort of a build plate holder that you can put on there to drip any excess resin back into the vat. Would be pretty cool. Again, it's all gonna depend on how large the print is that you have on the bed and if it would actually be able to fit into this and drip in properly. But again, it's not the biggest issue with that build plate, but it's just, again, something that nags at you every time you print with it. You have to make sure to scrape all of that resin off and then try to awkwardly pull it off and then hold it when it's times to remove the prints and then put it back on there. It's just not the easiest thing to work with, and maybe that's just how it's going to be with these larger machines, but who knows? Maybe someone will have some 3D printable upgrades that they can make for that to make it simpler. The other potential issue that you might run into on this machine is the actual screen itself. That screen is a disposable item. That's the same way for all of these resin 3D printers. It's a consumable piece of hardware. After a certain amount of hours, you're going to get dead pixels or the panel's just going to blow out in itself. So right now, it's about $100 to replace that. And it's great that those replacement screens are available over on Peopoly. It's just, it is expensive and you're going to have to pay for shipping. And right now, the lifespan, I think, is about 200 to 500 hours. So I'm still within that range. And other than the Cybertruck issue here with these prints and some of the little divots that I was getting here that I thought was the screen, I really haven't seen since. However, I do know that there are some folks over on the Phenom Facebook group that have posted some issues with that, and they were right around 200 print hours. So we'll see how this goes. It's all going to vary. Again, this is a brand new machine. It's sort of new technology, these huge resin printers. The screens heat up like crazy, which is why there's huge fans in here that are trying to cool off everything and prevent some of these screen issues and prolong the lifespan. It's also why they recommend certain resins that you print with over others. Not because it's maybe their resin or anything like that, which is probably some of the case, but it's going to help prolong the lifespan if it's not causing extra heating issues or printing issues with those actual LCD LED screens. All right, so that wasn't a huge list of issues that I had. I mean, other than the price, I would obviously love this thing to be cheaper, but it's brand new technology and it's honestly still a lot cheaper than what you'll find over at other larger resin 3D manufacturers. So this is kind of a discounted price for what you might expect. Anything under $2,000, I was honestly surprised to see for the build size and volume that we're getting here with the Phenom. But let's talk about some of the pros that are with this machine. Obviously the print quality, I'm seeing really, really good prints, and that's probably the most important thing when we're talking any 3D printer, whether it's resin or FDM, is the print quality. And I'm seeing some really nice prints off of this machine. The other is just beyond the weight of this machine and getting it to where it needs to be. The setup is super, super simple. It's great that they also took care of some of the shipping concerns that were out there with it being so heavy and not necessarily packaged as well as it should be. So they've kind of addressed that already. I've seen with more than a few posts online with people successfully getting this and not having any damage like 3D Printing Nerd did. I certainly didn't have any damage on mine, but it was really easy to set up. There wasn't a whole lot of work to do. It's more or less plug it in, put the build plate on, and go. And it was ready to print. It wasn't anything more difficult than that. And the interface is super easy to work with. It's very responsive. The controls, the terminology is all things that I would expect to see. There wasn't really a lot of funky menus or anything like that in this. It was very, very straightforward. I mean, it's not a huge screen by any means, but I don't necessarily need a huge screen either on the front of this machine. So again, just really easy to work with. Plus, it works with Chi2Box. So you can build out a profile in Chi2Box, do all of your slicing, your hollowing, supports, and then put that on your external card, plug it into the machine, and print. It's exactly the same process that you see with a Photon or the Elegoo Mars, which I'm very, very familiar with and working with. So it's great to see it's basically a much larger version of those machines. One of the other cool things is I've had this sort of off out of the way just because of the reflection from all the lights in the room here, is I really like the front display here. This is the UV protected screen, but it really allows you a much easier way to look into the printer as you have prints running on the machine, and it's just a really nice open display, which is really cool to see when you have much larger prints up and running as well. And obviously, I mean, the build volume is really large, so I mean, that's a huge plus, but that's kind of why we're interested in this machine in the first place. But one of the other things that I wanted to call out that I thought was really great to see is Peopoly already has a number of the replacement parts. So if you need to get a new FEP sheet or a build plate or the VAT here, or even the screen, they have those all up and running on their site where you can go off and buy those. I do know if you're interested in buying one of these that the wait time is about a month or so for these to be shipped and delivered to you. So I think some of that is just some of the challenges of shipping out of China these days with US regulations and all that other craziness. And I'm assuming it's also ramping up production on these units as well. So hopefully all of that, eventually comes in, but for now it's a hot machine. I ran into the same thing when the CR10 was initially released. I had to wait a month and change to get mine, and that was like 2 weeks, I think it was like a week after Preston put out his video. I immediately ordered mine, and it was already backlogged, and I was waiting for it to actually ship and arrive. So it's a similar process here, give or take. Even from Matter Hackers, they're waiting for their shipments to arrive so that they can ship those out to anybody buying here stateside. One of the other positive things I want to call out about the machine is just Peopoly in general has a great online community, from whether it's the Facebook group. There's 2 different Facebook groups, one for just Peopoly and their Moai and other printers, and then there's a dedicated Phenom group that's growing. They also have their own forum as well, which they're actively involved in. They're very vocal and active on social media, so you're able to get a hold of them and get questions answered if you have those as well. And that's not just me being an influencer and reviewer of the machines. I've seen lots of interaction with them and others online as well. So that's great to see. Overall, if you're in the market for a large resin 3D printer and you want to print really big things, maybe it's models or lots and lots of miniatures, maybe you have an Etsy business or something like that and you need to crank out lots of miniatures, you can print some amazing things on this resin 3D printer. And I definitely think, issues aside, it's a wonderful machine, and I've been extremely happy with the print quality that I'm getting out of this, other than when I've screwed up some of the things on my end. And aside from it being super loud and really heavy, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot of other negatives to say about this machine. It prints great, and yeah, it does what it's supposed to do, and it's easy to actually get files up and running on the machine as well, which is oh so important, because I don't want to spend all of my time going through and jumping through hoops to actually get a print up and running on this machine. So again, if you're interested in a really large, amazing resin 3D printer, I'll have links down below where you can check out the Peopoly Phenom. Some of the links down below might be affiliate links, and those help out the channel here, so thank you guys very much. And I'll also have links to all of the different files here that I printed and worked with in this video on the machine. And I also have some great files, again, that I have not shared, and prints that I've shown off on this machine just because I have some videos in the works that I did not want to spoil for you guys. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the Peopoly Phenom. You'll definitely be seeing more of this resin 3D printer in videos here in the upcoming weeks. Hey, thanks again for watching, you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.